One, you can get started now, I think.
Sure. So good evening, everybody. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Today, you're going to take on a little journey with us through the 1600s. I like to call that the late Woodland period. That was most definitely a major different time than what we are today. And so on this PowerPoint, you guys will see a bunch of different pictures and paintings, some artifacts, um, and different things that you would have saw or would have been used or utilized more so during the 1600s up into the 1800s during the late Woodland period. All right. So already in this first slide, you can see you have a man and a woman so far. They look like they may be leaders in the community. You can also see they have a baby, which is the baby right now is in a cradle board, which is something that would have been used during that Woodland period. Um, Very similar to what we most women use now with the carrier, except this one would have been made out of wood, just to more so stabilize the baby's back. So already you can see there's a lot of different lifestyle things, different lifestyle techniques and things that were used back then that we probably don't use now, or maybe we just use it in different form. And you can also see in the back a huge amount of canoes, or we call them mashoons or aquahans, that were used to sort of travel and to trade and different things like that. So already you can get a firsthand view of what we're about to move forward into.
Hey, Rod,
Yeah.
who are you?
So again, my name is Roderick Bell. I am the recreational coordinator for the Bronx River Alliance. I basically lead canoe tours throughout the 8 miles of the river. The river is about 25 miles long, but I focus primarily on the 8 miles from Shoelace Park all the way out into the estuary section in Concrete and Hunts Point Riverside Park. I'm also a descendant of the Powhatan community. Powhatans meaning people of the Medicine Hills. My family is primarily from the Virginia and North Carolina areas. And in I want to say maybe in the 1900s, my family migrated here to the Northeast, up into the Bronx. So this is where I resonate. But I spent a lot of my childhood between the Bronx, Virginia, as well as North Carolina. I also do a lot of work with indigenous groups and indigenous tribes. I travel a lot, putting on different living villages where myself and some of my peers, we also, come dressed in our traditional regalia, and we talk about lifestyle and sovereignty and sustainability in the 1600s and how it still applies to us this day. I also am a powwow dancer. I travel a lot to different powwows, meeting people and just sharing the gift of knowledge and trying to help rebuild the connection between our environment and ourselves and our community. So the first thing we're going to do is look at a video. This video was taken out in Martha's Vineyard with the Wampanoag and a bunch of other northeastern tribes. And I just want to give you an idea of how people who are indigenous or people who are descendants of the indigenous communities still live. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, a lot of this stuff is really, even though it was done back in the 1600s, a lot of it still carries on today. A lot of the traditions and artifacts and lifestyles the life ways that you are going to see later on in this PowerPoint are still carried on to this day. So I'm going to show you this video, and I just want you guys to keep this in mind and think about what are some of the traditions that you can still carry on from your family's legacy. What are some things that were done in the old ways that you can still do to this day to carry on to the future? Is it playing for you guys, Christian?
Oh, so when you share your screen, you've got to hit optimize sound and share computer sound and optimize video for screen sharing.
Yeah, so why don't you stop sharing?
Yeah.
So
and then you can do it again.
Say it again, Michelle.
Okay, so pause the video and then stop sharing and then
Okay.
reshare. And when you share, there's going to be a little toggle down in the lower left-hand corner of the which screen do you want to share, and it's going to say optimize sound or share computer sound and optimize video for sharing.
Okay, so share computer sound. Gotcha. All right, let's try this again. Thank you, Michelle.
It's been over 200 years since the Wampanoag of Southeast Massachusetts have had an opportunity to recreate what was a frequent event of trade happening between Martha's Vineyard and the tip of the Cape. And today the Wampanoag, assisted by members of 4 other tribes, will be recreating this trip between the tip of Falmouth and Aquinnah.
It means a lot to me personally. I've been trying to do this for so long, and it finally happened. Feels like reconnection with our people on the vineyard over here. What's called the vineyard, but we call it Cappawack, because we used to do it all the time. Native people go from the mainland to the islands, visiting, trading with them, socializing with them, and it feels great to just get it going again. We got people come from Rhode Island every Tuesday night. We had people come from Connecticut, the Mashantucket Pequot down there. 2 guys would come from Connecticut every Tuesday. From Nashby, people would come from Boston. So we all got together every Tuesday night for about 3 hours.
When I was on the mainland, we had a disaster practice, as they're labeling it. We got into the rip, and both of these boats went down. And we weren't supposed to be in that part of the water anyways, but personally myself, I was glad that it happened, because we needed to experience something like that before we got out in the middle and realized that something like that could happen.
You know, if you're in the open ocean in a canoe, you have to be able to, once you submerge, you have to be able to correct the situation. That is to right it back up and get all the water out of it. So it was an exercise in that respect. Whoever ordered this weather, must have been talking right to the top, because the water was perfect. We had some nice rollers out there, but nothing breaking. The fog was good because it kind of gave us. We knew that Moshop was with us, and in watching over things, so we had no worries.
It's hard to describe in words the feeling. You won't get the smile off my face for weeks. It's great.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely want to share that video with you guys so you can actually see through the canoe. That's actually one of the ways that a lot of indigenous communities have been able to come back together with one another and get back on the path of being stewards of the land, protecting each other, protecting the land, protecting the ecosystem. And it's been through that canoe or the Mashun that we've been able to regain some sort of commitment and fellowship with one another, and regain trust, and rebuild a bridge between the past and the present. And as you can see, one of those, that huge vessel that they were coming out of was actually a canoe that was burnt out, using traditional lifeways that that have been passed down, for 12,000 years and eons before that. Those type of traditions are still being passed down, and they're still being used. So moving forward, I would love for you guys to just keep that in mind, that there are a lot of things, from your past and from your family's culture, from different traditions and lifeways, that can still carry on into now, and it can still help us moving forward into the future, and sort of rebuilding our relationship with the earth, and our communities. So we're going to move forward in talking about the Eastern Woodlands, right? So the tribes that you saw in that video, a lot of them were northeastern tribes. And so they pretty much, like the gentleman said, a bunch of those different tribes in the Northeast, they come together, and they still practice those traditions and those lifeways. But one of the communities that we're going to focus on today are the Lenape, or some people know them as the Lenape Hoking, right? And we're pretty much going to travel back in time to the late woodland periods, where things are so much different. And as you can see in this painting, the landscaping is far more different than what we are normally used to seeing now. Now we see tons of buildings and cars and different things like that. Things are very much so modernized compared to how my ancestors lived on the East Coast and along the Atlantic. You would have seen tons of different fish that you don't see anymore here, tons of different trees that we no longer see. The lifeways have been much different. You would have seen a lot more areas burned out, as far as us having controlled burning techniques to make sure that we can build our villages. You would have seen a lot more use of the water. You would have seen a lot more women being active down at the beaches. You would have seen a lot more men roaming around into the woods, and a bunch of different rivers and streams and things like that. They would have looked a lot different than what they are now. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to the Bronx River, but the Bronx River looks so much different than what it would have looked like in the 1600s. It was actually dredged, meaning it was widened. But back then, it would have been a lot more narrow. It wouldn't have been as wide. And you would have seen a lot more different trees, tulip poplar, chestnuts, things like that you don't normally see anymore. And you can see below, I do have the correct spelling, the Lenape, and that's the proper pronunciation as well. So,
Hey, Rod.
yeah.
Sorry, the screen for some reason is a little bit blurry. I don't know. It's like kind of pixelated. Maybe if you stop share and restart, it might clear it up.
How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Great, great. So moving forward, the Lenape, or some people know them as the Delaware, were one of the many Eastern Algonquin tribes that lived along the Atlantic. Um, Primarily, you would have seen them down into. I mean, well, they were naturally called the Delaware because that is the area that they most definitely inhabited. They also inhabited parts of New Jersey, as well up into Manhattan and into the Bronx as well. So they were a thriving community and they utilized most of the area up here in the Northeast, especially where we are, especially where your school is. That is the area where you would have primarily saw Lenape people moving around and planting and doing all different types of things like that. And so the different dialects that they spoke from the Lenape were Muncie and Unami. Um, and the Lenape word means true people. The word Lenape means true people. So that is one of the definitions that have been used to describe who the Lenape people were back then. Um, and as you can see here, you have a bunch of different people here. They're pretty much having a ceremony. And as you can see, this woman here with these a special turkey feather cape on, she is, one of the leaders in that community. And that's something that would have made her stand out. Basically, a lot of the stuff that she's wearing. And in the back, you can see the gentlemen, they're wearing a lot of deer skin. They have drums made of skins. They have moccasins on. Some of them have crowns on made out of turkey feathers. And in the back of the painting, you can also see one of their weetus. And that would have been made out of cattail reeds, which is something that grows along different estuaries. And something that's really cool, if you guys ever been to the botanical gardens, they actually have a rock with a turtle that was carved out into the rock, which is also a remnant of the Lenape communities being here in the Bronx. So I encourage you guys, if you ever get out to botanical gardens, you can ask them for that area and they will direct you to where you can actually see where a Lenape person had carved into the rock a huge turtle, which definitely shows that they were here at some point. Get the slide switch. Awesome. So one of the things I want to ask you guys, do any of you guys know when Native American people, especially the Lenape people, would have celebrated their New Year's?
Sorry, Rod, I'm going to bug you again. It got back to being blurry. I think if you uncheck optimize for video, like uncheck those two boxes that you checked before, maybe it'll clear it up again. I don't know why it's giving us so much trouble today. Ooh, perfect.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
So when do you guys think most of us celebrated New Year's? When would New Year's started for people who lived in the Eastern Woodlands? What season primarily? Feel free to unmute yourself and say it, or you can write it in the comments.
It's okay to be wrong, guys. You can just guess.
Yeah, I just want to know, to get an idea of what you guys think. I know what time period we celebrate New Year's now, but I'm just curious as to when you guys think in the 1600s people celebrated New Year's.
Catalina says probably in spring.
That's correct, Catalina. We would have primarily celebrated New Year's in the spring. And why do you guys think the spring resonated as New Year's for us? What happens during the springtime that would have signify that we are having a new year? What happens around the springtime? And again, no right or wrong answer. Just type in what you think. This is all a learning experience for all of us. So during the springtime,
I know y'all know what happens in spring.
During the springtime, you have the fish start running, especially like the alewife. Right. The sap starts to run through the trees. Right. the plants start to, start rejuvenating themselves and coming back. So there's a lot of different things that happen during the springtime that would have allowed us to, to understand that this is the new year. This is the time to, to restart, right? As a refresher. It's like during springtime, it's like it's like having a reset, right? Right. So during the springtime, you would have started to see a lot of the families coming out to live along the coast. Um, Essentially, you would have seen a lot more children being able to play and be themselves. Um, they didn't have really a lot of responsibilities. They were allowed to just be themselves. You would have started to see more women coming out of their villages from the winter, um, and start moving all along the coast and rebuilding their homes along the coast. Um, Primarily, you would have brung your house more inland during the wintertime. But once spring started to happen, we started to remove those homes and start transferring our homes to moving more along the coastal line. Um, and during that time, a lot of the young women would have, pretty much been mirroring their moms and seeing what their moms were doing, whether they were making clothes or gathering food, learning how to build certain things around the village, around the areas. And about back then, you would have seen usually 2 to 3 thousand people living in one village. So essentially, there would have been a lot of work to do, and there would have been a lot of different tasks at hand for everyone to get involved in. And usually around this springtime, you would have seen a lot more men going to hunt. Men essentially were considered the takers of life. It was our responsibility to go out and capture food. We didn't pretty much do too much domestic work. We went and made bowls, we made paddles. We would have went out and burned our canoes, which you guys saw in that video earlier. Which something like that, burning out a canoe, usually takes 4 to 6 weeks to do. So we had a lot of time on our hands, to get things done. Um, Deer, of course, would have been one of the most important foods that we would have went after. Sometimes you would have went after elk, beavers if you could, and a lot of times you would just grab whatever you could and bring it back to the village and just throw it into the pot where the women would have been cooking at that time in the village. The women played a huge part. We were, not only were they, essentially leaders, but we were matrilineal and matriarchal people. So the women were at the forefront of our communities. A lot of our elders were women, and a lot of the power were passed down through the family lines of the mom, right? Um, and so when men were married, they were essentially married into the woman's family, right? And you leave your family's home, move in with her, and sometimes it'll be her mom, her sisters, her aunts, her grandparents, things of that nature. Um, and so primarily men did have power, but for the most part, you would have seen more women being in charge of the communities, and they would have been more in charge of the domestic work. You would have seen them making clothes. You would have seen them gathering, food, foraging, and in this painting right here, you can see some of the women doing some of the domestic work. You can actually see inside one of the wigwams or the weetus here, and you can see the woman here with her baby. Of course, she would have been nurturing her baby most of the time as well as working. Um, and most of the framing that you see on that house that she's in, that would have been done by her husband while she was doing a lot of the sewing and cooking and cleaning and things like that. I see we have a question. Great. Thanks for doing that, Christian. So another big part of Lenape community um, were our elders, right? Our elders were super important to us. They were the carriers of knowledge. They were the carriers of wisdom. And it took a long time before you could actually become a elder. You had to really, make a lot of accomplishments. You had to have a lot of experience throughout your time. There was so much respect and reverence for our elders. They ultimately had the last say in a lot of the things that went on in our communities. And back then in the 1600s, because the diet was so much different, a lot of our elders even, went past 100 years old. You know what I mean? Like, diet was so much different. I want to say 60 to 70% of the diet during the 1600s was fruits and vegetables. Maybe another 10 would be, berries or whatever things you could forage. And maybe 10% of that diet was also meat, if you could find it. We didn't necessarily always have successful hunting, right? And usually men who came back empty-handed, we called those guys vegetarians. But for the most part, fruits and vegetables would have been your main source of food. And we had a very distinct and unique relationship with the earth. Primarily, we saw ourselves, along the same lines of our four-legged creatures, of the winged creatures, the insects, the sun, the earth, and the moon. We all were on the same line. We all were on the same level. No one was above the other, and we pretty much shared a symbiotic relationship with one another. Just like some of the primary foods we would have eaten was corn, beans, and squash. And with the corn, you plant the corn first so that it can grow really high. Then you will plant beans next to it so that the beans can put nitrogen back into the soil, because the corn is going to pull all of that nitrogen out, right? And then you will plant squash right next to the beans so that the squash can cover the ground almost like a natural mulch, and prevent other animals from coming into eating at the roots of the corn, beans, and squash. That was the type of relationship that we also had with the earth. As we made sure that we took that anything that we were taking, we were also putting stuff back. And usually, how you would do that is if you were, to go forage or harvest anything. A lot of times you would go and put tobacco down on the ground as an offering before you took anything. Even for the men, when you would go and hunt, before you would go and do any type of hunting, sometimes you would fast, for weeks ahead before you even went and took anything. So there was always an exchange and a respect for life. So here's some questions to think about when we talk about natural resources that are provided, from the earth, and things that grow naturally. So what do you guys think would happen if we lost our natural resources, right? And some of the natural resources that we still have to this day, are trees, fruits, vegetables that still grow, stones, things like that. Another question to think about are any of these being lost as a result of human activity? And I think that's something that all resonates with us, that we still see the effects of to this day. A lot of pollution being in the water, a lot of different diseases and things that come and kill natural trees, and a lot of invasive species that come in and pull out all the nutrients to prevent our natural plants and herbs and things from growing. Another thing I want you guys to think about is, what do you think we need to do to ensure that our resources will be around for future generations? And I think that's something that we don't often think about. I think we have become so comfortable going to Walmart and going to BJ's and picking all these fruits and veggies and things like that, and not forgetting, will this stuff be around in the long run if we don't continue to keep our ecosystems in balance, right? And one of the things that we often run into down at the Alliance and around the Bronx River is an abundance of invasive species that we cannot seem to get rid of. One of the major things that we are seeing is Japanese knotweed, right? It's insane how much of it that grows. I'm pretty sure some of you may have seen it if you've taken a walk along the Bronx River. But those are one of the things that we're up against. We would really like to protect our natural plants, but there's so many things that are invasive that it's becoming more difficult. We don't know this stuff will be around in the future. So some of the things that we would have used with the natural resources were trees, right? We had an abundance of different trees, chestnut, tulip poplar, cedar. Those types of trees would have been used to make canoes, mashoons, or we would have used something called a mortar and pestle, which I'm pretty sure a lot of communities still use to this day. That would have been used to grind down corn. It would have also been used to grind down different herbs, or to just probably juice something. If you had something that was really sweet and you want to get the juice from it, you use some water to juice that stuff out. And the cool thing about this is when you use fire on it, it's pretty much carbon neutral, so you didn't really have to worry about any emissions or anything toxic actually going up into the air from you burning it. So mortars, came in handy, and they last a long time. Wigwams, or we call them weetus, that also would have been used from trees. It would have pretty much used the saplings. A lot of times you would use cedar saplings. You want to use cedar because cedar is natural antibacterial, and it also lasts longer, and it's far more flexible and pliable. And you would have used the bark from the trees to cover and insulate our homes. And of course, we talked about the dugout again, or the machine that would have been used to travel. Sometimes we made those canoes so large that you could fit 40 to 50 men and women side by side. So that's a big thing. That's a big vessel that you really want to protect and maintain. And because it takes so long to recreate, you don't want to keep utilizing all of your trees for it. And the cool thing about this is when we burn it, we were scraping it down, and we were allowing it to heat up. And when you allow the machine to heat up, you're allowing the sap to naturally run throughout the tree, and then it'll seal up any holes that are in the tree, which now makes your canoe waterproof. And then you would make it heavier at the bottom, so then that your canoe is seaworthy, so you can travel out and do a lot of whaling and do a bunch of different things like that. What do you guys think of some of the fish that would have been caught in the 1600s that we don't usually catch today, or we don't see now? I also saw somebody had a comment.
Do y'all remember the fish that Amber used to talk about? Really special fish of the Bronx River.
So especially down in the Atlantic, one of the most unique fish that would have been caught back then was the sturgeon. The sturgeon was highly favorable to a lot of the Lenape communities. And sturgeon are really unique because they come up, especially at night. So the men would come out in these canoes with torches, and the torches would sort of attract the sturgeon, and they would jump up out the water, and we would spear them. And sometimes the sturgeon was bigger than the boat, so you'd have to just drag it to shore. We had an abundance of different tools. So like I said, those stones would have come in handy. You would have wanted to use a lot of different stones, primarily things like flintstone, or if you were able to trade with different communities, sometimes you can get obsidian, which is more of like a glass. And I'll give you an example of something that I have. This is a pretty cool knife here, and this is a deer jaw, and this is actually obsidian. This would be the blade. This is primarily what you would have had and what you would have used during the woodland periods. And this could have been used to cut, bark if you needed to, cut fish if you needed to, cut string and twine. So this would have came in handy. Great. Thank you guys for writing in the comments section. Okay. Pottery was also another big thing. A lot of the women would have spent their time creating these huge pots. And I'll give you an example of how small they could be or how big they are. This is a medium-sized pot that would have been used. And as you can see, these are some different designs that would have been, you would have seen on it. And these are unique to the East Coast. These patterns you would have seen primarily on the East Coast, and these were heated. This was put on fire on top of rocks, and it would have been heated, and you would have been able to hold water. You wanted to boil water, or you wanted to make soup or stew. This is what you would have used. And sometimes the woman would make even smaller ones, and this would have been used to forage, or if you wanted to make a specific type of tea or anything, that you wanted just personally for yourself. This is a smaller type of pottery that would have been used. And this is all made from clay, which is, dug right from the coastline. You would have harvested a bunch of clay, and, you would have spent most of your day out there rolling that up. I think most of the communities use a coiling method, which is where they will coil up the clay, rub it between their hands, make a big circle, and pile the circles on top of each other. And once they got the clay up high enough to where they want it, then they would fold it in and mold it to how they want it. So it was a very intricate procedure. And it's something, one of those traditions that is definitely passed down. A lot of communities are still making pottery. And so that's why it's important that we're making sure that our soil is the health of our soils is correct, right? Because if we're making pottery out of the soil that may be contaminated, I don't think we want to cook or make pottery with contaminated soil or contaminated clay. You know what I mean? That's not something that we want to do. And it's also better than a lot of um, the plastic things that we use now. Our plastic bowls and stuff like that, which are now still putting pollution into the water because most people don't actually throw it into the garbage; they throw it out in the street and it ends up somewhere else. So these are actually far more friendlier for the environment.
Rod, we got a quick question in the chat. Catalina wants to know if you made any of those artifacts or if you were given them.
No, I'm more of a canoer. Making pottery isn't my thing. I've tried it a couple of times and it never truly works out for me. So I usually have a friend. She's really good at it and she makes pottery for me. I'm still learning. It's still a process, but primarily it would have been women who will far more have the eye for that type of work. I'm still going to work on it though, because I think it's still a good technique to have mastered. So one of the last things we want to talk about is medicine, right, and plants. Along the Bronx River, along the Manhattan coast, along the whole Atlantic coastline, there's an abundance of different medicinal plants that were used and still are used to this day. We're going to talk about some of them. And I just want you guys to keep in mind, what are some medicinal plants that you know of? What are some that might grow in your neighborhood? And also, has your family ever used medicinal plants? So have any of you guys used medicinal plants in your home? Is that something that you guys actively incorporate into your daily regimen?
One Piece says he's used them. Juan, can you give us an example of some of those plants? You could put it in Spanish or English. So I'll give you an example while we're waiting. We use a lot of mint. We use a lot of ginger in my family. Because my dad is Jamaican, and so they make a lot of teas. Tea for anything. Oh, he says hortata. Okay. Yeah, we use a lot of mint and ginger in Jamaica.
Christian, was there any other ones that people are using?
Yep, aloe vera is another one.
Nice, aloe vera.
Yep. That's Catalina.
Anybody else have unique plants that their family still uses? Whether it be in food or tea or when you're sick, what are some plants that your family will give you to rejuvenate yourself? Okay, cool. All right, let's look at some of these plants. Right.
Yeah, I think some of them probably.
So primarily you would have had an elk.
I was gonna say they may not know that some of the plants that grow around them are actually medicinal. So I guess they're gonna find out very soon.
Sure. So a lot of times in Lenape culture, they would have had a person who was designated for administering medicine, and we would have called them a powwow or medicine man. They were people who were trained and knowledgeable of certain plants. Still, I guess we call them doctors, right? And some of them take, a holistic approach, and some of them take more of a Western approach to fixing symptoms or or mending certain problems that we have, whether it be broken bones, a cold, or anything else like that. And medicine, uh, it wasn't strictly just for men to be administrators of medicine. It could also been a woman as well. I mean, now we just call them herbalists. And again, like I said, we had would go out and harvest anything from the earth. So we would have just went out and took these plants. We would have prayed over them. We would have fasted over them. And would also put down a ball of tobacco as well as an exchange. Giving before you take anything. And so one of my favorite plants that I utilized since I was a child is sassafras. Have you guys ever heard of sassafras? Has anyone ever had root beer? The primary flavoring and the primary ingredient in root beer is sassafras root, which is primarily why it's called root beer. So that yet unique taste and that smell that you get from drinking root beer, for those who like it, that comes from sassafras. This would have also been used to heal skin conditions. If you're someone who had psoriasis, if you're someone who had eczema, they would boil sassafras root up and it would apply it to your skin, and it would help bring moisture back to your skin, and it was also antibacterial. Ginger is another one of my favorites. It was primarily used for the stomach. It helps with digestion, indigestion. It was also good and effective if you were someone who had asthma. It was also really good for the scalp. If you are you have thinning hair, if you're losing hair, it was really good to stimulate the scalp. Ginseng root is also very, very unique. Right now, they have certain laws against harvesting it. You have to have certain passes and certain things legally in order to harvest it. My family primarily utilized it in the Carolinas as well as Virginia. We had an abundance of it growing. But ginseng is really unique because it takes so long for it to actually grow and for you to actually be able to use it. You can't grab it when it becomes really small. You have to wait for it to get really, really big or to a certain size. You can actually apply it to a tea, or chop it up and adding it to, whatever you need to use it for. But again, up in the Appalachian Mountains and in the Carolinas and Virginia is primarily where you would store it. And it's also really good for people who may be diabetic, if they're having blood sugar issues. It's also good for the immune system and just vitality or longevity in helping to boost your cells and your organs. Red cedar is also another good one. I primarily don't really use cedar as in teas. I normally put it in my shoes. And the reason why I put it in my shoes is because cedar is antibacterial. So, sometimes if you're working on your feet all day and you're sweating, that accumulation of sweat and bacteria will build up into your shoes. And so that's what causes that funky smell sometimes you may get in your sneakers. And also because, it's being enclosed and there's not a lot of air going in and out of your sneaker. So you can put red cedar or cedar root or cedar bark into your sneaker and it will naturally absorb all the moisture from your shoes, and it will prevent any bacteria from accumulating and creating any unnatural smells that you don't want to really have. We have an abundance of different cedar along the river. Most people would have used it as a tea, and you could also just use the bark for making homes or making utensils, making bowls, and any other outdoor type of things you need to use it for. Some doctors use it to alleviate symptoms of fevers, tuberculosis, and also to reduce coughing. Peppermint, which is something that Christian, I know you talked about earlier. And cool thing about peppermint is actually it's a hybrid of two different plants that help create that unique smell and that taste that you get from peppermint. I normally use it too to help soothe my asthma symptoms. Some women use it to alleviate menstrual symptoms, and it's also really good to relax the muscles and to help with symptoms along with nerve pain. Stinging nettle is also one of my favorite. I don't know about you and Michelle. I mean, I don't know about you, Christian and Michelle. Uh, Stinging nettle, I have a special relationship with it because some of my first work days out on the river, I actually ran into stinging nettle unknowingly, and it brushed up on my legs, and it actually really, really hurts. The the uh, the hairs on the plant actually sting. They actually feel like little micro needles um, being pushed into your skin. But the cool thing about this is actually really good for people who have arthritis and eczema. It's really good for treating the symptoms of that. It's something about the way that the needles or the hairs interact with your skin and with your muscles. They sort of trick the brain into not worrying about the arthritis symptoms or the eczema symptoms, and it helps alleviate a lot of the pain from that. But if you also make a tea out of it, you don't really have to worry about the stinging hairs. It doesn't bother you at all once you apply it to some water and boil it. Um, so a cool thing about that is the relationship between the um, stinging nettle and jewelweed is that they actually grow right next to each other. So often when I would run into the stinging nettle, I would have to immediately grab some jewelweed. I remember Christian, I think it was you that helped me find an abundance of it and pop open the plant. The jewelweed actually has something similar to like aloe vera, um, like the young lady was talking about earlier. And so you apply that aloe vera or that lubrication onto the area that's affected with the stings, and it helps alleviate the symptoms on it. Um, it's also good for promoting blood flow. It's also good for swelling and healing symptoms from joint pain. And you can actually find this stuff along the river. So any of you guys ever um, take a hike throughout the Bronx River, you'll be able to find some of this stuff. It really grows in a lot of moist and shady areas, and you'll also notice it right next to the stinging nettle. Dandelion, I'm sure many of you guys see dandelion all the time. You cannot miss it. It's also really good for acne, eczema, and also alleviates some of the symptoms that comes from diabetes and even cancer. Most people see it as a weed, but it definitely serves a purpose um, in medicinal. Wild licorice. I know a lot of people hate licorice because they only think about black licorice, but there is a difference from black licorice and American licorice. American licorice, of course, is native. Some people use it; they chew on it to alleviate sore throats. It's also good as a tea, to alleviate coughs, chest pains, stomach aches, and sometimes fevers. So I encourage any of you guys to grab you some licorice and keep it in your household. It can definitely come in handy. I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with sage. Sage has a really unique smell to it. Most people don't like it. I'm not a big fan of it because sometimes I'll use it as well. It's also really good for bloating. Um, for anyone who has Alzheimer's, it helps with the symptoms of that, and also helps to create an appetite. Blueberries, of course, is one of my favorites. I love blueberries. I eat them all the time. Um, the native, to the Northeast, they really help with diabetes and obesity, and they're also just a great snack. You can't go wrong with blueberries. Cranberries too. I love cranberries. I have a love and hate relationship with cranberries. I'm not crazy about them. I do enjoy cranberry juice though. I will say that. And cranberries are definitely used to help with urinary tract infections. Um, they're also good for different disorders or different things like scurvy, and help with appetite loss as well. Um, so if you guys get your hands on some fresh cranberries, definitely juice them and preserve them. They're really good. And one of the last things I want you guys to reflect on and just think about and keep in mind are what would be an action that you can take that will be beneficial to our environment. Uh, and what do you think are some of the actions that we take that are bad or have a negative impact on our environment? Um, I know for me, one of the things I start to do is making sure that I don't shower too long, um, making sure that I'm not using harmful chemicals in my laundry because I know that they're going to end up in the ocean. I'm learning to use more products from wood, wooden utensils, wooden bowls, wooden spoons, things like that, to completely remove plastic from my environment. Something else I want you guys to think of are what might be standing in your way and making it difficult uh, to make an environmental change in your life, right? That's something that I think we all have, faced with. I think that's something that we all can understand. And lastly, are there any activities that you think might encourage the community to make these changes as well? And I know for me, I've been, really fighting to keep the canoe program going and keeping more of our community interacting with that water. I know that the more people that get out and learn more about water safety and learning about the ecosystem and how the water plays such a huge impact on our communities, more people will respect it and more people will um, have a positive effect and a positive outlook on the water and many other bodies of water, just like the Bronx River. And I know to my people, we didn't see the river as a line, as a barrier. You know what I mean? It was a connection to the other side. And so we always try to make sure that both sides of that river were taken care of, not just one side. And making sure that we didn't just go out and pull from that water. We also make sure we put things back, right? Um, and I hope that some of you will get to come out on the Bronx River one day and get an even more in-depth look into the Bronx River and the unique ecosystem around it, and some of the other work that we're doing to protect and restore the river. I think the Lenape were on the right track, taking care of their areas. One of the most prized parts of land that they utilized was Manhattan, or what we call Manhattan now. And I think that had they been allowed to continue to be the original stewards of that section of land, things would be much different. I think we wouldn't have to worry about, with the greenhouse gases or, having toxic water and toxic soil and not being able to have natural resources that we normally have. I think things would have been much different had they been allowed to evolve the way that they were supposed to. I think often we talk about the clash of culture between the Europeans and the indigenous people. We fail to talk about the clash of the ecosystems, right? A lot of things that grew in Europe um, are growing here now that we don't necessarily need and that are harmful to the environment and the ecosystem here. So there's been a huge clash of different things. And I think it takes all of us to come together and sit at the table and think about different ways that we can pull from our communities and pull from our culture to sort of be um, better stewards to the land and give the land back to the next generation in better hands than we had it. And that's something I just want to leave with you guys. And I definitely want you guys to think about these questions and walk with them and hold on to them throughout your life and then throughout your journey. Because I think that protecting the environment is something that we all have to take on. It's not a job for just one person. So I thank you guys for coming on this journey through the Eastern Woodlands. Here's a last painting that you can see. Here's a celebration of the Lenape people. They're sitting out on the beach. They have a whale, and you can see the canoes and paddles. And pretty much this is how they live life. Most of the times they spent their lives outdoors. They weren't very lazy people. They didn't sit inside watching TV and things like that. They were very, very much so involved in the environment and very involved with things that were going on in the community. Around this time, they would have been coming out, singing and dancing and feasting and harvesting and just being around one another and socializing. And I think that's something that we all need to do far more and really recognize the relationship that we need to continue to have and cultivate with one another and the natural world around us. So again, my name is Roderick Bell. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to reach out to me. My email is paddle@bronxriver.org if you guys are ever interested in coming out and canoeing and just learning more about the Eastern Woodlands and learning more about how you can have better, more positive effects on your environment. feel free to reach out to me and we can have a discussion and I can send you materials to read. And if you are someone on your journey looking to find your culture and finding more about your past and what are different life ways and traditions that your family did, feel free to reach out to me and I'll help you out and help lead you in the best direction as I can. I want you guys to all enjoy your day. Thank you, Michelle and Christian, for being here and helping to facilitate and help bring this together. I'm just getting back to the office and I haven't done this type of work in some months, but it feels good to actually be back on board and doing this type of work.
Great job, Rod. Thank you so much. This is awesome. Thanks. I don't know about you guys, but this just makes me really want to get out. And now that it's spring and everything's coming back out, I want to see all these plants again. I want to see all that wildlife that's coming back out from hibernation. So thanks for tying it back, Rod, to,
thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Great.
Any questions that you guys have for Roderick while he's still here?
Ooh, someone mentioned mangoes. Good one. Mangoes are excellent. I love mangoes.
All right, y'all. Please check Kirsten's email regarding, I think, the survey from last week. I think she sent us an email, so just please check that and respond to her when you can. And otherwise, we'll see you all next Thursday.
Awesome. Take care, guys.
Bye, y'all.